In the early years of World War II, the Atlantic Ocean became a graveyard. German U-boats, sleek, silent predators, hunted merchant ships by the hundreds. Convoys burned across the waves, their cargoes of food, fuel, and weapons sinking into the black depths. The world had seen submarines before, but never like this. The Kriegsmarine turned the Atlantic into a battlefield without front lines, where a single torpedo could cripple an empire. For a time, the U-boats ruled the sea. Their captains were legends, Dönitz's gray wolves, striking unseen, vanishing before the enemy could strike back. But as the Allies adapted, with radar, sonar, and air patrols, the hunters became the hunted. And deep within Germany's bunkers, a question began to grow. Could technology turn the tide once more? Could a new kind of submarine make the oceans fear the Reich again?
The year was 1939, and the world's greatest supply line had just become its deadliest battlefield. From Canada to Britain stretched the lifeline of democracy. Convoys of ships carrying food, fuel, and weapons across a sea now crawling with German submarines. The U-boats struck like wolves in the dark. One flare, one torpedo, and the night erupted into flame. Merchant sailors called it the longest battle of the war, and they weren't wrong. It would rage from the first day to the last. Every crossing became a gamble, every captain a target, and every ton of cargo delivered was a victory of courage over fear. But as Allied ships began to fall faster than they could be built, the question was no longer if Germany could choke Britain's lifeline, but when.
The ocean had no mercy, and neither did the hunters that prowled beneath it. By 1940, the Kriegsmarine had perfected a terrifying new strategy, the Rudel tactics, the Wolfpacks. Dozens of U-boats stalked convoys in silence, spread across the Atlantic like invisible predators. One submarine would spot the prey, signal others, and soon the sea itself would erupt in chaos. Under the moonlight, torpedoes sliced through the waves. Merchant ships exploded in fiery columns, lighting the night sky as crews abandoned ship into oil-slicked waters. The U-boat commanders, confident and ruthless, called it the happy time. To the Allies, it was anything but. Entire convoys vanished without a trace. Naval escorts were too few, too slow, and too blind to find what hunted them. The Atlantic had become a graveyard, and the wolves ruled the deep.
The wolves had feasted long enough. By 1942, the Atlantic was no longer silent, it was armed. Convoys that once sailed helplessly now moved in formation, shielded by destroyers, corvettes, and aircraft that scoured the waves. The Allies had learned the rhythm of the hunt, and they began to turn it against the hunters. Depth charges rained like thunder beneath the surface, each explosion a heartbeat of vengeance. New sonar systems pierced the ocean's silence, and radar painted the night sky with unseen blips of death. From the icy waters of the North Atlantic to the stormy Bay of Biscay, U-boats found themselves hunted. For every merchant ship lost, another submarine never returned home. The hunters had become the hunted. And the Atlantic, once ruled by fear, began to tilt toward fury, Allied fury.
The ocean was no longer the U-boat's ally.
What once hid them now betrayed them. By 1943, Allied technology had rewritten the rules of underwater war. Radar could see through fog and darkness, tracking submarines even as they surfaced for a breath. Airborne patrols, armed with ley lights, turned night into day, catching German crews frozen in disbelief as spotlights pierced the waves. Destroyers and corvettes no longer guessed where to drop their depth charges. They knew. Sonar pings echoed through the deep, guiding explosions that shook steel and shattered nerves. Each improvement, radar, sonar, hedgehog mortars, was another nail in the coffin of the U-boat supremacy. The hunters who once stalked convoys in silence now found themselves surrounded by a storm they could not escape. The Atlantic had turned, and beneath its gray waves, Germany's pride was dying, one ping at a time.
By 1944, the Atlantic, once Germany's hunting ground, had become a graveyard. U-boats were sinking faster than they could be built. Every patrol meant fewer men returning home. The Allies ruled the seas with radar, aircraft, and convoy systems so tight that even a periscope's glint could mean death. The Kriegsmarine, once proud, once feared, was now cornered. Desperation replaced dominance. Admirals demanded miracles, engineers worked in bunkers, and Hitler demanded a wonder weapon to turn the tide. Old submarines were dragged back from the docks, modified, and pushed out again, slower, louder, and hopelessly outdated. But beneath the chaos, a new idea was taking shape. Something so advanced it barely seemed real. A submarine that could outrun destroyers. One that could stay submerged for days instead of hours. One that might restore the terror of the deep. Germany's last gamble was about to surface.
In the final years of the war, deep within hidden shipyards, German engineers dreamed of something revolutionary. A submarine that wouldn't just dive beneath the waves, it would live there. They called it the electroboat, the electric boat. It would move silently, powered not by noisy diesel engines, but by massive batteries that could carry it hundreds of miles underwater. No more surfacing at night to recharge. No more fear of radar or air patrols. It was sleek, hydrodynamic, shaped like a bullet gliding through the ocean. Faster underwater than on the surface, a first in naval history. This wasn't a simple upgrade, it was a revolution. For the first time, the submarine would truly become what its creators had always imagined. A predator that could strike unseen, vanish beneath the waves, and never need to come up for air. To the engineers, it was genius. To the admirals, it was salvation. To the Allies, it would soon be terror. In dim drawing rooms and fevered design offices, the electroboat moved from idea to ink. Engineers sketched curves the sea had never seen. Long, narrow hulls designed to slice water without waking the world above. Every line on the blueprint answered a problem that had haunted U-boats for years: speed, endurance, stealth. They packed the plans with audacity. Huge battery banks to store electrical power for days of submerged running. Streamlined hulls borrowed from aircraft design to cut drag and noise. Hydroplanes and a new propeller shape to push the boat silently through depths where sonars lost their bite. But brilliance came with cost. The blueprints demanded precision manufacturing, rare materials, and shipyards free from bombs, luxuries Germany no longer possessed. Still, the drawings poured out, desperate and determined. Pressure hulls thicker than before,
internal layouts that put engines and crew in a new relationship with the sea and a new thinking about tactics: strike, vanish, survive. These were not the scribbles of hopeful boys. They were the last gamble of a navy that had been hunted into its harbors. On paper, the Type 21 promised to change the rules of the ocean. On paper, it was the kind of miracle the Kriegsmarine had been praying for. But blueprints alone do not sail or fight. They would need factories, workers, and time, all of which the war was beginning to steal. Still, for a brief electric moment, Germany sketched a future where the submarine ruled the deep, and the Allies trembled at an idea that should not have existed.
When the Type 21 finally emerged from Germany's shattered shipyards, it looked like nothing else on the ocean. Sleek, smooth, and silent, a predator built for the next century, not the current war. Gone were the crude rivets and rough welds of early U-boats. This machine was sculpted by desperation and genius, designed to move faster underwater than on the surface. A submarine that finally belonged beneath the waves. Twin electric motors powered it silently through the deep, while enormous batteries kept it submerged for days at a time. It could dive deeper, run faster, and reload torpedoes in minutes, a process that once took nearly an hour. Radar detectors, sonar, and hydraulic systems gave its crew eyes and reflexes no other navy could match. To Allied intelligence, reports of this electric boat sounded like fantasy, the work of rumor or fear. But to those who saw it in person, the truth was terrifying. It wasn't just a submarine. It was the blueprint of modern warfare beneath the sea, decades ahead of its time. Had it arrived a year earlier, the Atlantic might have told a very different story. For the first time in history, a submarine had broken the rules of the sea. The Type 21st was faster beneath the waves than above them, a feat that stunned even its own designers. Traditional U-boats were surface ships that happened to dive. They crawled underwater at a few knots, their engines gasping for air, their batteries dying fast. But the Type 21st changed everything. With a hull shaped like a teardrop and massive electric motors humming in silence, it could reach 17.2 knots submerged, faster than many destroyers hunting it. On the surface, it was slower, because it wasn't meant to be there anymore. This was the moment submarines evolved from hiding vessels into true underwater hunters. The ocean was no longer a refuge. It became their domain. To Allied sonar operators, it was a nightmare. To German commanders, a revelation. And to history, a glimpse into the future of naval warfare, when the surface would no longer matter and the deep would belong to machines like this one. The Type 21 wasn't just another U-boat. It was a complete rebirth of submarine engineering. Every bolt, every cable, every line of its hull was drawn with one goal: to make the ocean its home. Gone were the old riveted seams that rattled under pressure. The hull was welded, smooth and strong, slicing silently through the deep. Its batteries were 3 times larger than anything before, feeding twin electric motors that gave it power undreamed of in earlier designs. It could stay submerged for days, glide without noise, and dive to depths that left Allied sonar guessing. Inside, hydraulic loaders could fire a spread of torpedoes and reload in just minutes, something no Allied submarine could even imagine. And its sensors, radar detectors, sonar, and periscopes, sharper than ever, gave it eyes in the darkness. It was more than a machine. It was a prophecy. The Type 21 was what submarines were always meant to be: silent, fast, and deadly. It was a revolution forged in desperation, and proof that even as Germany's empire crumbled,
its engineers were still designing the future.
It moved like a shadow beneath the waves, unseen, unheard, unstoppable. The Type 21 wasn't just advanced, it was predatory perfection. Every curve of its hull was shaped by science, not guesswork. Its streamlined body cut through the depths with almost no turbulence, making it nearly invisible to sonar. Gone were the noisy engines of old, replaced by whispering electric motors that left no wake, no clue. Inside, a new level of precision ruled. Compressed air systems operated quietly. Hydronic loaders rearmed torpedo tubes in seconds, and every instrument glowed with purpose. The crew could barely hear the engines themselves, only the faint hum of a machine built for stealth and speed. It could dive deeper, stay hidden longer, and strike before the enemy ever knew it was there. A true underwater assassin, the first of its kind. If the Atlantic had once belonged to the hunters, now it belonged to the hunted. The Allies had built the ocean into a trap, but Germany had just designed the ghost that could escape it.
They worked in silence, in underground bunkers, shattered shipyards, and bomb-lit workshops. Men driven not by politics, but by obsession. To them, the Type 21 wasn't a weapon. It was proof that even in ruin, German engineering could still defy gravity, water, and time itself. Names like Helmuth Walter, Friedrich Schurer, and Heinz Schlicke became whispered legends in the halls of design bureaus. They were the minds who refused to accept limits, who looked at the ocean not as an obstacle, but as a laboratory. They experimented with new battery systems, synthetic materials, hydrodynamic hulls, ideas that other nations wouldn't touch for decades. They argued, calculated, failed, and tried again, under the constant threat of air raids that could erase their work in a single night. Every blueprint drawn was a gamble against time. Every test was a battle against destruction. And yet, they built it. The impossible submarine. A machine so far ahead of its era that even the victors would one day copy it, quietly, carefully, and completely. The Type 21 was not just a product of war. It was the last masterpiece of a nation collapsing under its own ambition.
By 1944, Germany's cities were no longer skylines. They were craters. Factories burned, rail lines twisted like melted wire, and workers dug for survival as much as for production. Yet, beneath this devastation, something astonishing continued: the assembly of the Type 21 submarine. The Allies could destroy buildings, but they couldn't stop an idea that had gone underground, literally. Hidden under mountains, buried beneath forests, and carved into abandoned mines, the new shipyards took shape. Slave laborers and exhausted engineers worked side by side, building pieces of submarines that were never seen whole until they were transported to ports like Hamburg and Bremen. Each U-boat was born in fragments, hull sections forged in one city, wiring in another, batteries deep in the Harz Mountains, all connected through a shattered rail network that barely functioned. The sounds of hammers and drills echoed through tunnels meant for coal, not dreams. Even as bombs fell above, work never stopped. They built in the dark. They built under rubble. They built because they believed, or were ordered to believe, that this machine would turn the war around. And though the cities burned,
the U-boat factories in the Earth's belly whispered of something terrifying. Germany wasn't done yet.
By late 1944, Germany was fighting not just the Allies, but the clock. Every day the front lines shrank, the skies grew darker with Allied bombers, and the seas became deadlier for U-boats. Yet deep inside the collapsing Reich, orders were clear. The Type 21 must be built at any cost. Factories once crafting aircraft and tanks were torn apart and retooled for submarines. Thousands of workers, many forced laborers, toiled around the clock in a desperate bid to assemble the most advanced sub ever conceived. But this wasn't ordinary production. It was chaos disguised as efficiency. Sections of the new U-boats were built in over 30 different locations, then shipped by rail to assembly yards barely functioning under bombing raids. Engineers knew the deadline was impossible, yet failure meant punishment or worse. Blueprints were rushed, quality control was abandoned, and pieces often didn't fit when they finally arrived. Still, in the midst of destruction, they pushed on. Every launch was a small miracle, proof that Germany's industry could still move even as the nation itself was dying. The Type 21 wasn't just a weapon, it was a last gamble built with the hope that one revolutionary machine could somehow turn back time. But as Allied tanks crossed into the fatherland, time had already run out.
In the cold waters of the Baltic, under the gray skies of a dying Reich, the first Type 21 submarine slid from its cradle. It was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Sleek, streamlined, silent. This was not a boat built to surface. It was a machine designed to live beneath the waves. Unlike the old U-boats that had to rise for air and recharge, the Type 21 could stay submerged for days, powered by massive batteries and new electric systems that made it nearly invisible to Allied sonar. Its hull, a radical hydrodynamic shape, sliced through the water faster underwater than on the surface, something no submarine had ever done before. Inside, it was a technological marvel. Automatic torpedo loaders, advanced sonar, comfortable quarters by wartime standards for a crew meant to live and fight in the deep. For the men who stepped aboard, it felt like boarding the future. When the launch signal came, the submarine eased into the sea, its engines humming quietly beneath the surface. Even the German officers watching knew this was a glimpse of what might have been. If the war had started a year later, or the design had come a year earlier, the ocean war might have ended very differently. But now in 1945, the most advanced submarine in the world was entering a war that was already lost.
When Allied intelligence first heard whispers of a new German submarine, they dismissed it as desperation, another of Hitler's miracle weapons promised too late to matter. But then, radar screens began showing something strange. Convoys reported sonar contacts that moved too fast underwater, faster than any known U-boat could possibly go. The old rules of the Atlantic War were breaking. Depth charges dropped into the sea, but the echoes came from miles away in seconds. One destroyer commander described it as chasing a shadow that could swim. When the Allies finally captured a Type 21 intact at the end of the war, they were stunned. The sleek hull, the massive batteries, the quiet propellers, everything about it was decades ahead. Engineers examined its shape and whispered, "This isn't a submarine. It's the future." The Allies realized they hadn't just won the war, they had stumbled on to the next one. The Cold War navies of the world would soon be built on this design, from its shape to its silent engines. In 1945, the Germans lost the sea, but in a strange twist of history, their final creation became the blueprint for every submarine that followed. By 1944, the Atlantic had finally become safer. Convoys moved with confidence, radar-guided destroyers swept the seas, and Allied air patrols ruled the skies. But then came the rumors, whispers among sailors and merchantmen, stories of a new kind of U-boat, one that could stay submerged for days, strike without warning, and vanish beneath the waves before anyone could react. Merchant captains began to report strange sonar pings, fleeting contacts that disappeared too fast to track. Depth charges exploded into empty water. Some said the Germans had created a ghost submarine. Every radio silence, every flicker on the radar sent a chill through the fleet. In London, Allied commands scrambled for answers. In the harbors of occupied France, the Kriegsmarine worked in secret, racing to launch their new weapon, the Type 21, the submarine that changed the rules of the sea. The Atlantic once again felt haunted. The hunters had become the hunted, and the ocean held its breath, waiting for the next attack that might come from anywhere beneath the waves. When the first Type 21 slipped beneath the surface, the ocean itself seemed to change. For the first time in history, a submarine could outrun its pursuers underwater. It no longer needed to surface to breathe, to charge, or to flee. It was a predator reborn, silent, swift, and deadly. Destroyers that once circled like wolves suddenly found themselves chasing shadows. The Type 21 could dive deeper, move faster, and fire from below the depths where no sonar could follow. Its electric motors purred instead of roared. Its streamlined hull cut through the water like a blade. In training, it shocked even its own captains. 17 knots underwater, nearly double the speed of Allied subs. In the control room, the crew watched the sonar echo of their hunters fade behind them. For the first time, the hunted had become the hunter. But the miracle came too late. By the time the Type 21 was ready for war, Germany's shipyards were in ruins, its fuel was gone, and its seas were surrounded. Only a handful ever reached the open ocean. Still, in those final months, every Allied sailor knew if this submarine had arrived a year earlier, the Battle of the Atlantic might have ended very differently.
For years, Allied ships ruled the surface with radar, eyes that pierced fog, night, and storm. No plane, no ship, no convoy could hide once the screen began to glow. But beneath the waves, radar went blind. The ocean was the great equalizer, a wall of silence where light and radio waves could not reach. While destroyers swept the seas with radar beams, the Type 21 slipped below, invisible to every pulse and echo. It could stay submerged for days, powered by batteries that needed no air, no surfacing, no risk. Depth charges fell blindly, guessing at its shadow. Sonar pings bounced off empty water. And in that silence, the Type 21 could strike, fire its torpedoes, and vanish, unseen, unheard. To Allied commanders, it was terrifying. Radar had given them control of the war, until a machine appeared that lived where radar couldn't see.
They boarded her in silence, sailors hand-picked from the remnants of a navy that once ruled the seas. Young men, barely trained on the new controls,
yet filled with something rare in 1945, belief. They had heard the stories, a submarine so fast it could outrun destroyers underwater, so quiet it could strike unseen, so advanced that made every other U-boat obsolete overnight. The Type 21 wasn't just another weapon, it was a promise that Germany could still change fate. As they descended the narrow hatches, they saw smooth electric panels where pipes used to hiss, batteries stretching the length of the hull, controls glowing with eerie precision. It felt like stepping into the future. In their hearts, they thought, if one boat could do this, maybe we could still win. They whispered it in the mess, between canned meals and the hum of the motors. This isn't the end. This is the beginning again. But outside, the war was collapsing. Their miracle had come too late. And yet, even knowing that, they went to sea, chasing one last chance to prove that technology could defy destiny.
The Type 21 was meant to be Germany's miracle, a weapon to turn back the tide. But as its sleek hulls began taking shape in shattered cities and underground tunnels, another war was being fought, one within the Reich itself. The shipyards were no longer symbols of pride, they were prisons of exhaustion. Forced laborers, Poles, Frenchmen, Norwegians, even captured Russians, worked under the eyes of SS guards, surrounded by concrete, fear, and starvation. They built the very weapon meant to prolong their suffering. And so, quietly, they began to fight back. Bolts were loosened, wires crossed, valves left unsealed. A single drop of sand in a gear, a misaligned panel, a circuit intentionally miswired, tiny acts that could doom a U-boat deep beneath the sea. On paper, hundreds of these new submarines were completed. In reality, only a handful were ever seaworthy. Some never even left the docks before flooding or short-circuiting. German engineers suspected something, but the system was too broken to fix itself. By 1945, Sabotage had become as deadly to the U-boat fleet as Allied depth charges. And the irony was bitter. The future of submarine warfare undone not by enemy fire, but by the hands of those forced to build it.
By the final months of the war, the shipyards of Germany were graveyards of ambition. The revolutionary Type 21 submarines, sleek, silent, and decades ahead of their time, were supposed to turn the tide of the Atlantic. Instead, most of them never even touched open water. Berlin demanded hundreds of boats. The orders were impossible. Factories were bombed, materials ran short, and crews were drafted straight from classrooms. Many of the hulls were built in sections by slave labor, then shipped by rail to ports already under attack. There they sat, half finished, half functional, and entirely too late. U-2511, U-3008, a few made it to sea, glimpses of what could have been. But the rest remained tied to the docks, incomplete or unfueled, symbols of a dying empire's desperation. As Allied bombers thundered overhead, these submarines, the most advanced ever built, became monuments to Germany's collapse. Engines that would never start, torpedoes that would never fire, dreams that would never dive. And when the war ended, the Allies found them waiting, dozens of silent giants rusting in their harbors, not as weapons, but as warnings.
By 1943, the Allies knew exactly where Germany's naval heart was beating. Kiel and Hamburg, two proud shipbuilding cities, had become the lifelines of the U-boat fleet. Every submarine that threatened the Atlantic convoys began its life there, beneath the smoke and steel of the northern coast. So the bombers came, night after night, wave after wave. Lancasters, flying fortresses, and liberators rained destruction on the shipyards below. Docks were shattered, cranes twisted, and the waters of the harbor turned black with oil and fire. The massive concrete pens that once protected U-boats became tombs, their roofs cracked by the relentless pounding from the skies. Each strike wasn't just an attack on a city, it was a blow to Germany's ability to wage war beneath the sea. Still, the workers toiled. Men, women, even prisoners labored under the ruins, piecing together submarines as the ground trembled around them. Every launch became a miracle, every completed hull a triumph of endurance against inevitability. But no matter how deep the bunkers, the bombs reached them. By 1945, the great shipyards of Kiel and Hamburg were shadows, vast fields of wreckage and silent cranes overlooking waters filled with broken steel. The Allies hadn't just destroyed factories, they had crippled Germany's dream of ruling the oceans.
By the spring of 1945, the dream of a new underwater empire was slipping away. Germany's miracle submarine, the Type 21, was ready at last. It could glide beneath the surface faster than any destroyer could chase. It could stay submerged for days, and it carried enough power to change the war at sea. But the clock had already run out. Fuel was scarce, shipyards lay in ruins, the Reich's ports were surrounded, its coasts bombed into silence. Dozens of Type 21 submarines sat unfinished, trapped in dry docks and tunnels as Allied troops closed in. Those that managed to launch were rushed, untested, and plagued by sabotage and shortages. A few set out to sea, too late to make a difference. They never met a convoy, never struck fear into the Atlantic again. Instead, many surrendered before they could fire a shot. In the end, the most advanced submarine of the war belonged to a nation that could no longer fight it. The Type 21 didn't save Germany, but it reshaped the future. The Allies studied its design. The Soviets, the British, and the Americans would all copy its technology. Every modern submarine, silent, swift, and unseen, carries its legacy. The U-boat of the future never ruled the seas, but it built the foundation for every navy that came after.
When the war finally collapsed around Germany, the race for the future began. It wasn't just cities and factories that the victors wanted, it was knowledge. As U-boats surrendered across Europe, the Allies made a shocking discovery. Hidden among the standard submarines were sleek, futuristic craft unlike anything they'd seen. The Type 21, Germany's electric boat, was more than a weapon. It was a glimpse of tomorrow. American naval officers were the first to board several surrendered U-boats in May 1945. What they found stunned them. Batteries twice the size of anything they used, hydrodynamic hulls that sliced through the water in near silence, and periscopes with optical rangefinders so precise they looked like science fiction. Meanwhile, Soviet forces sweeping into the Baltic seized their own prizes. Entire U-boat pens, blueprints, and engineers fell into their hands. Each side knew whoever mastered this new submarine design would control the oceans of the future. The Americans took several Type 21s back across the Atlantic for study. The Soviets did the same, dragging captured hulls to Leningrad and Gdansk. In the years that followed, both would rebuild and rename them. The US creating the Guppy class, the Soviets launching the Whiskey class, each inspired directly by the German originals. The war was over, But the underwater race had only just begun. The Type 21 had not served Hitler, but it became the foundation for the navies of the superpowers that replaced him.
In the ruins of post-war Germany, engineers who once designed weapons of terror now found themselves surrounded by their former enemies, scientists, admirals, and intelligence officers eager to learn. The Allies didn't destroy the Type 21, they studied it. Every bolt, every valve, every curve of its streamlined hull was examined in secret naval yards from Norfolk to Leningrad. The Americans brought several of the submarines to their testing bases. They dismantled them piece by piece, recording every innovation: hydrodynamic shaping, snorkel systems for underwater diesel use, and massive battery banks capable of keeping the sub submerged for days. All of it went into U.S. development programs. Soon, a new generation of subs emerged, the Guppy class, leaner, faster, and built for endurance. They were not German copies. They were American evolutions, born from the lessons of the Type 21. Across the Iron Curtain, the Soviets did the same. Captured engineers and half-finished U-boats were quietly shipped east. From their studies came the Whiskey class, then the Zulu and Foxtrot submarines, machines that would soon haunt NATO waters during the Cold War. Even the British and French drew inspiration, reshaping their post-war fleets to match the underwater revolution Germany had sparked. The Type 21 had failed to win the war for the Reich, but it won a strange kind of immortality. Its blueprints reborn under different flags, its ideas sailing into a new global struggle. The submarine that came too late for Hitler became the one that shaped the next half-century of naval warfare. When peace came in 1945, it was peace in name only. Beneath the surface, a new kind of war was already beginning, silent, unseen, and fueled by the lessons of the German Type 21. The United States and the Soviet Union, now rivals instead of allies, both knew that control of the seas meant control of the world. But in this new era, control wouldn't come from massive battleships or surface fleets. It would come from the depths. The Americans transformed their captured Type 21 blueprints into a vision of their own. Submarines that could remain underwater for days, stalk their prey in silence, and vanish before being detected. This vision gave rise to the Guppy class and later to the USS Nautilus, the world's first nuclear-powered submarine. The ideas born in wartime Germany had evolved into something far beyond anyone's imagination. Meanwhile, in the East, Soviet engineers working with German scientists under watchful eyes rebuilt the Type 21 in their shipyards. Their Whiskey-class and Zulu-class subs became the backbone of a growing underwater armada. Soon, the Cold War oceans were filled with steel ghosts, American and Soviet subs circling each other in the dark, descendants of a design that had first terrified the Atlantic. The race for stealth, endurance, and power would never end. Each improvement pushed the world closer to a future where a single submarine could end civilization. The Type 21 had not just changed the war, it had changed the world beneath the waves and birthed the most powerful, silent force humanity had ever known.
In 1945, the Type 21 submarine was a weapon without a war, a masterpiece that arrived too late to make its mark. But history would remember it not for the battles it fought, but for the generations of submarines that followed in its shadow. Its sleek, hydrodynamic hull inspired every major navy that came after. Its battery-powered endurance became the blueprint for long-range, silent operations. Its snorkel system, mocked by some as unnecessary, became standard on nearly every submarine built for the next 20 years. Naval architects from the US, Britain, and the Soviet Union all came to the same realization. Germany's engineers had leapt forward by decades. The Type 21 was not a late-war experiment, it was a prophecy. By the 1950s, echoes of its design could be seen in the American Guppies, the Soviet Whiskies, and even the British Porpoise-class submarines. When nuclear power finally arrived, giving subs endless range, it was the German dream of an all-electric, deep-diving vessel that guided their evolution. Every sonar dome, every smooth hull, every silent motor was an inheritance from the boat that should have ruled the Atlantic, but instead changed the future. The Type 21 never won a battle, but it won the war of ideas. It was the bridge between the desperate final months of World War II and the cold, silent standoff that defined the next half-century. A weapon too advanced for its time, and a legacy that still moves unseen beneath the waves today.
When the guns of World War II finally fell silent, one weapon slipped quietly into legend. It never won a battle, never sank a fleet, yet its influence reshaped every navy on Earth. That weapon was the Type 21 submarine, the ghost that changed the future of naval warfare. While bombers and tanks dominated headlines, this machine was something else entirely. A glimpse of tomorrow conceived in the dying days of the Reich. It moved through the deep like a shadow, faster submerged than on the surface, guided by batteries and silence instead of smoke and steel. The world's admirals and engineers studied it in awe. They realized that surface ships, even mighty battleships, were now vulnerable. The true battlefield of the future would be beneath the waves, where no radar could see and no sailor could hear his enemy coming. From its design came the submarines of the Cold War, the nuclear hunters and missile carriers that circled the globe in secret. The Type 21 had birthed an era where a single vessel could patrol for months unseen, its presence enough to shape diplomacy and deter war. It was more than a weapon, it was a revolution wrapped in steel. A machine built too late to serve its masters, but destined to define the oceans for generations. In the end, the Type 21 became what every engineer dreams of creating, a design so far ahead of its time that the world would spend decades catching up. The war ended without its victory, but its legacy sailed on in every submarine that followed, a ghost beneath the sea that changed the course of naval warfare forever.